Project MK Ultra, also called the CIA Mind Control Project, is the code name given to the program of experiments on the citizens of America and other countries. These experiments can be described nothing short as atrocities. Today we will look at these experiments in more detail and the terrible discontent that the CIA treated American citizens, soldiers and other personnel with, as they saw them as nothing but objects to be tested on. Join us as we discuss the weird and terrifying world of the MK Ultra and CIA experiments. Hey guys, I'm Sai and welcome to Ace Podcast Nation, the channel which features podcast series on a whole host of subjects. We have shows and series on mental health, football, films, TV, wrestling, music, serial killers and much, much more. Including the new series, Unscripted and Uncensored, where we've got no run through or no scripts and you guys send in the questions and subjects for the guests. Unedited, unprepared and can be a bit unruly. We've had Rodri Giggs, the owner of Away Day Apparel, and Lee Remedios, ex-MMA fighter, on those shows so far. They've been a lot of fun and they've been quite popular. You can find all our shows in video format at the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/AcePodcastNation, and audio versions at all the usual podcasting sites, including the newly available Deezer, Google Podcasts and Breaker, and soon to be iHeartRadio. You could find us and join the conversation at facebook.com/AceCastNation. No podcast. So to join me, it's been a very long time since we've had a chat about the old conspiracy theories. It's my co-host Rhys. Welcome back, buddy.
Good to be back. Sorry it has been too long, mate.
Too long. It's going to be good. It's going to be interesting as usual. So the last time we were on, we did MK Ultra and we just talked about it generally. So today we're just going to go into some specifics and specific cases because there's a lot. I only Googled for like half hour and I found like a load of different ones. So we'll just go through some of them, talk about the shit they got down to, because it is shady shit, mate. So a little quick disclaimer before we head down the terrifying and weird road to conspiracy theories. We want to point out that just because we discuss a particular theory doesn't mean we believe it to be true, agree with the points of view in any way, or think that that's what went down. We are simply discussing the popular theories and the evidence presented by the people who championed them. Say that quicker and quicker every time.
Getting good at it, mate.
Yeah, it's repetitive, isn't it? But there we go. Got to say it because someone will get upset. But you know, we talk about them because they're interesting, mate. That's the way. That's the gist of it. That's it. People love conspiracy theories. Still the most popular show that we do, like on a regular basis. All the different guests, and that's some decently big names on the show so far. And you know, they all do well. Especially some of them do. The Andy Campbell shows doing really well on YouTube and audio downloads, but like this one is like the most consistently downloaded, so we haven't had a few for a week, so hopefully people will be itching for some more. Okay, so CIA documents which were declassified suggest that they investigated chemical, biological and radiological methods of mind control as part of MK Ultra. They spent an estimated $10 million or more, roughly adjusted would be $87.5 million for inflation. Like $10 million. Well, there you go, $87 million for what money is today's shitload of money. Like $10 million in the 50s and 60s is just that's just an incredible amount of money. So they thought it was viable, particularly the LSD side of it. They thought that was the way to go. That was the way to break prisoners. That was the way to, wipe people's mind. That was the way to create these Manchurian candidates, which obviously we will do a show just on Manchurian candidates, just because I love the films. But there we go. So like the early CIA efforts, they focused on LSD, specifically LSD 25, which is a particular strain, and it dominated the MK Ultra programs. The CIA wanted to know if they could make Soviet spies defect, against their will, whether the Soviets wanted to do so or not, and whether the Soviets could do that to the CIA operatives. So, like, as I've, a friend of a friend who took LSD has told me that this is very, very unlikely because it's just not a controlled environment to do it. Like, there's so many different things and different ways that it could go when you give someone LSD, particularly again when they don't know about it. But even when you give it to someone who knows about it or has volunteered for it or, is a willing participant, there's so many things that can happen, so many different experiences, and it can go downhill real quick to the point where the person who's taken it, can't speak, basically. And obviously, after 15, 20 years of trying, they found that out. And they abandoned sort of using LSD. They did use other drugs, but they liked their LSD. So we got on Project MK Ultra got underway in 53. Sorry, they included giving LSD to mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and sex workers. Basically, people who could not fight back, or people who, if they moaned about it, the authorities basically wouldn't care.
People no one cared about, pretty much.
Well, that's it, mate.
It's
definitely. That's why they did it. And obviously they moved on because in this one article, which I was sort of getting some of the information from, it says one agency officer put it that these people couldn't fight back, so that's why they were the initial test subject, because
easy prey.
So they were one patient who was in a mental health facility in Kentucky, they gave him LSD for 174 days straight. Not giving it to him. Oh God, yeah. If he was, and plus he was already in a mental health facility, but and that's not giving him LSD, and then it wears off like a day later, and then that's giving it to him every day, like a medicine at 8 a.m. in the morning, every day. Take this. Can you imagine? I like with all drugs, I suppose, whether they're recreational or like just pharmaceutical, by the doctors, there becomes a point where you hit like a maximum where your body is not going to be affected by it.
Yeah, does it start
it just stops? Like I like you can only get so high, I suppose, or so you can only get so much effect. Like if you took, so like for instance, like the painkillers which I have to take, like I take whatever dosage, but if I keep going back and saying it's not working, there'll be like a maximum dosage where they'll say, oh, we'll have to try something else because it just won't do any different, and if anything, it'll do the opposite. And I'd imagine at some point over that 174 days, it probably stopped working. But by the time they got to that point, that guy would have been in such a mess. I don't care what anyone says. There's no way that person recovered to ever have any semblance of a, I don't want to say a meaningful life, because he could have gone on. He might just have a lot of issues, but like to have a normal, as whatever normal is these days, there's no way he would have been able to go and have a job and a family and stuff, because
surely he'd have to be seriously affected from that.
Well, mate, like just doing just people who do like psychotropic drugs like LSD and mushrooms and things like that on a regular basis, it messes them up.
Totally.
Whether it's just a little bit or just an extra bit. Like I told you before about my friend who took magic mushrooms when he was about 16, had a really bad experience up a mountain and got lost, and never recovered. Like, he recovered from it and he went on to have a decent life, blah blah blah. But he's had mental health problems ever since.
Yeah.
He's paranoid, and always, and like he even took it again a couple of times after that to try and counteract it. So like have a good experience, so that it wasn't all that he could think about. Had like the bad experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And like that person, he only did it 3 times, I think, or 4 times, and it caused loads of issues for him throughout his life. Like, and he's like the same age as me now, like 38, 30, 37, 38 this year. So like, if you think of that, just 4 times in a whole life of magic mushrooms, not even a high dosage either. That was like a really, really low dosage, because it was the first time he had ever done it.
Yeah.
So like, if you think, so even if you say he'd never done the other 3 times, he still would have had the negative effects, because it happened the first time. He took a really low dosage, and he still was messed up from that first time. The other times was kind of like I wouldn't say like a peer pressure thing, but it was partially because he wanted to have a good experience, like people he knew had to kind of wipe out the other one, but also just because like other people were doing it, and it was like a thing to do. But that one time caused him loads of issues. So if you imagine if he had done it like loads and loads of times throughout like a 2 or 3 year span from like 16 to 19, he could have had some real like proper like psychiatric issues, which could have caused hospitalization and stuff. So you're talking about a really low dosage. And I know like if everything affects everyone differently, but this guy who already had mental health issues, given it for 174 days, and you're talking like a chemical, they would have given him like, it would have been like a pure kind of dosage. It wasn't going to be like mixed or cut with anything, because they were using it for, it was in a laboratory, being used for experiments. But they didn't give a shit.
It's crazy,
so
man.
Yeah, and they also administered LSD to CIA employees, military personnel, doctors, other government agents, members of the general public, just so they could study their reaction. The LSD and the other drugs were often administered without the subject's knowledge or consent, which is a violation of the Nuremberg Code, which the US had actually agreed to follow after World War II. So, like, they were breaking all sorts of laws doing these experiments.
Now, probably, man.
Yeah, well, of course they are. They just do it in a different manner these days, isn't it? Yeah, and so what they did, there was this one operation which was called Operation Midnight Climax, which sounds like a porn film in itself. The CIA, they set up several brothels within agency safe houses in San Francisco, California, to obtain a selection of men who would be too embarrassed to talk about the events. So basically, they dosed these guys in the brothels. The brothels were equipped with two-way mirrors, and the sessions were filmed so that they could view them and study them afterwards. In other experiments, the people were given LSD without their knowledge. They were interrogated under like really bright lights with doctors in the background taking notes. They told the subjects that they needed to extend their trips, and if they refused to reveal their secrets, they would keep dosing them. It's horrific, mate.
That's just it's just pure torture.
Well, mate, if you think like if you were having a bad trip anyway, just generally, and someone threatened you with, I'm going to prolong it, because I hear again through friends that like if you're having a bad trip, one of the worst feelings is that you feel like you're never going to come down, it's never going to wear off. And because like LSD and mushrooms tend to be like a 12-hour thing, obviously varies, but like generally they're quite a long experience. It can be, that's the thing which makes people lose it or be a bit paranoid or go on like I have a bad experience, because they think, what if I never come down? And because you're taking something which alters your brain and alters your brain chemistry and the way it functions, they can't always talk themselves down or talk themselves logically into or it'll wear off in a bit, and they go into this big spiral. So you imagine you had like bright lights and you're being asked questions and you're being tortured, and then you have that threat of we're gonna dose you again and make it even longer. It's horrific, mate.
That's the worst type of torture is mental
Oh, absolutely, mate.
and
And
emotional.
I feel like these days they've realised that over the years, the CIA and these types of people who do this sort of thing have realised that when you use violence as torture, people will generally just eventually say what you want them to say. Whereas I think psychological and mental torture is something which can be used in such a way that they think certainly that they can get the truth out of people easier, or they can break people easier. But it's the long-term effects of those tortures and those abuses, which I think, well, we'll get into some of them now. But like, people set up several brothels inside the agency safe houses, San Francisco, California, and they used to basically select men who would be too embarrassed to talk about what was going on. They would dose them with LSD, and then the brothels were equipped with one-way mirrors, and the sessions were filmed for later viewing and study. And then they'd have other experiments where the people would be given LSD without their knowledge, and then they were interrogated under really bright lights. And the doctors and like we were talking about, like the trips and stuff, and the amount of like psychological stress that would be when they say things like they're going to extend the trips and stuff is just scary, mate.
Oh yeah, it's beyond. How can they get away with doing it?
It's bizarre, mate. And the thing is, the people under interrogation, who they were using, they're like CIA employees and US military personnel, agents of like suspected of working for like the other side and Cold War and stuff. And it's like they're doing that to their own people. So God knows what they were doing to people who they had, no affiliation to whatsoever, like just Joe Public, or just like homeless people, or like we discussed before, like prostitutes and sex workers and stuff. It's just scary, mate, because they're using like people, like CIA people and US military personnel, agents as well, spies. They're going to be like aware to a certain degree of certain things, and they're going to be aware of the tactics and the experiments going on, or at least some of them would be. And they were just doing it to them as well. Like
they were just doing it to anyone they wanted to.
Yeah, it's like because they had no control over it because of the type of drugs that they were using. Like we know now that it would never work the way they wanted it to work, but because of that, it caused a lot of long-term debilitation afterwards. Several deaths resulted from this, and then people who had been dosed would turn to other drugs where they couldn't cope with with the psychological trauma of it all, like heroin and stuff like that. And what they used to do as well is they would use heroin addicts, but they would bribe them by giving them more heroin into taking LSD. So like that just tells you everything you need to know then, doesn't it? Because
you've never found out what doses of LSD and things they've been giving them as well.
Yeah, it just says the type, doesn't it? Which was obviously like a clinical sort of type of it, which would have been pure and would have been cut with stuff. But and the thing is, like when they were using people like who were already addicted to like heroin or cocaine or whatever, already drug addicts, they're only interested, those people, in how they can get their next fix.
Yeah.
So of course they're gonna say, yeah, I'll take some LSD if you give me my next dose of whatever.
And the thing is, back then, LSD, they didn't really know much about it, and it
No.
was quite a respected drug, should we say? You know, loads of people at the time were doing it as well.
Oh yeah, like it was rife within
Yeah,
like rock
Woodstock,
stars and stuff
and look
like
at all
that.
that.
Mm. And like, it's weird looking back on it because like what they wanted it to do, LSD wouldn't do that. Like it's not something which would wipe your mind, and yeah, it might be able to be used if it was mixed with other stuff.
It makes me think, what were they using with it?
Yeah, they I know in some of the stuff which I had, they said that they were using other drugs like mescaline and DMT and AMT and psychobilin, and like they did, they were using other psychoactive drugs, but
Yeah,
like they seemed to focus in very much on LSD as their kind of drug of choice. Certainly in the early days of MK Ultra and stuff, and the other experiments which they did before that, which we talked about in the previous show. So they slipped LSD into the Deputy U.S. Marshal Wayne Ritchie's drink. He had a bourbon and soda, and they put LSD in his drink. He had a bad trip, which culminated in him holding up the bar at gunpoint. He was fired from his job as a U.S. Marshal, and only decades later, in 1999, he actually learned that he had been the subject of this secret drug experiment, and that he was one of many test subjects. Like that guy lost his livelihood. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like he had this really respectable job, which I'm sure he really liked. He was high up. He was a deputy and whatever, and he lost it all. And then, like decades later, he finds out, oh, that's why I went nuts out of the blue for no reason. It's too late then, isn't it? Do you know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like
Dead,
he's
over,
retired, and then
and they
you
just
think,
cut him
yeah,
loose and just leave him there.
discarded him, left him out to think that he had like just been. Well, it's difficult to say what the medical people would have said at the time. Like these days, people would have just thought he'd had like a psychotic break. So I tend to think, I haven't got any information to say it, but you tend to think that if the medical personnel of like the 50s and 60s, they would have probably just chucked him in a mental hospital or something, or a veterans hospital, or, somewhere, even if it was only temporarily while they assessed him after the incident. But like they weren't exactly working hard with mental health and stuff then, to find the problem. They would have thought he just went nuts with a gun and just lost it one day.
Yeah, they were just like,
Just,
screw you, over, then.
yeah, he
Gone.
was just
Forget about him, get
discarded.
on next one.
So, at the invitation of Stanford Psychology, a graduate student called Vic Lovell, who was an acquaintance of Richard Alpert and Alan Ginsberg, Ken Casey, they volunteered to take part in what turned out to be a CIA-financed study, which was under sort of a MK Ultra, which was taking place at the Menlo Park Veterans Hospital. And they basically, this Vic Lovell, he worked as a night aide, um, and they just basically in this hospital just studied the effects of psychoactive drugs on the patient. So they used LSD, psilocybin. I can't really, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Mescaline, cocaine, AMT, DMT on these people. Uh, Many of which didn't know that they were being given it. But like even like the LSD and the others, like cocaine, obviously people know what that does these days. But like DMT is like supposed to be more like full on and more visual hallucinations than what LSD causes.
Well, I've
Just
got a story about that.
go
I've
on.
got a friend who was at Glastonbury this one time, and he met these two Mexican chaps, full on fucking Aztec Mexican weird dudes. My friend told me, and they gave him a tiny, tiny little line of this white powder.
Mm.
And like when my friend was saying this story, my friend was quite offended that they'd given him such a small line, because obviously he thought it was Colombian marching powder.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It turns out it was this DMT. 16 hours later, my friend has been through the feeling of every drug imaginable and visited lots of different worlds and planes.
Oh,
That
yeah.
stuff is
Joe,
it's out of this world, mate. It's, watching my friend on it was crazy.
yeah, Joe Rogan's a big proponent of it. He says that he thinks that it's healthy to do it like a couple of times a year or once every now and again because it helps like center you and helps you get in touch with like different parts of your soul and your
There's
body
a
and your
reason
mind, and
everyone
it
loves
just
Joe Rogan so much, mate. He's the nicest, craziest psychopath you'll ever meet.
yeah. But the thing is, like he views it as like a way to get out of stress and think of things differently and think of the world differently and like this sort of stuff, which is all very well if you know you're taking it and you know,
I'm
right, I'm
with
going to
him
do this and
all
I'm
the
going to go
way
with it.
when he comes when he says like the things he promotes as such, should we say, and what he finds gives him a more balanced life, etc. When it's natural remedies, I'm with him all the way, mate. But
Yeah, absolutely.
chemicals, DMT, LSD, anything like that, somebody is making it. You're putting your life in someone's hands. You know,
Yeah,
that's some
absolutely.
serious shit, mate. You know, things
Oh,
that
yeah.
grow ground, you know what they are. Whether it
No.
be mushrooms, cannabis, whatever way he chooses to do it. I mean, even cocaine in its most natural form technically grows out the ground.
Yeah, and well, look at the Leeds Festival this weekend. Last night, this 17-year-old girl took some, I don't know what it was. Actually, I was going to say ecstasy, but took some sort of drugs, and she OD'd or she died overnight, like 17-year-old girl. And the problem is you hit the nail on the head a minute ago. Is when you take something from anyone, if you take something from someone you don't know, if you take something which isn't like a homegrown or isn't grown naturally, you're
Yeah,
putting yourself in a position where you're trusting people, you're trusting the people who make it, then you're trusting the people who've bought it, and either they're not cutting it with something because they want to make more profit, and then you're trusting then the final sort of
yeah.
dealers who are selling it at the festivals or the
Like
streets, and it's
the
like
massive change in it all was in our era, mate. When I was younger, I'm talking 16 to 18, like I'm 41 now, so I'm a bit older than you. When I was
yes,
younger, drugs made people happy and love everyone.
yeah,
Nowadays, people only want to do drugs to get off their face. And that's not the purpose of drugs and the point of it. You know, these things were brought out to make you feel better, basically.
yeah, and it's like I say, it's like these days. I think you just don't know this. Like I think like when we were younger, if you were buying like weed or something, it was like off someone's brother or a friend of a friend of a
Yeah,
friend. You always kind of knew where you were getting stuff from,
yeah,
but like these days, like obviously, like I'm the same as you. I'm old and I'm completely out of that type of scene now. But like I was in it when I was younger, and like it was very rare that we would have got anything off anyone that we didn't know.
yeah,
And I know I still understand that the risks are still the same because it goes through several different groups of people before it gets to the person who's selling it to you, you on the street or whatever. But like, you
but the
know,
huge difference
it's
back then was like
there was
in
no
my
internet.
town, like say for cannabis, there was probably only four people you could go get it off. Nowadays, there's 4 people per fucking street, mate.
Yeah.
And
Well,
with so many people selling it, it's the same as a shop. They're going to start trying to find a way to make their product cheaper, or a way
to make
do
more
you see
money.
what I'm going with it? You know,
Yeah. Whether it's to make it stronger, to make it last longer,
yeah.
to cut it in so that they're not using as much of their stuff. To,
I got a friend who works in drugs in the police, and I remember
yeah.
saying to me once, basically, something like 99% of the cocaine you find on the streets nowadays is about 2-3% pure.
Yeah.
She
Oh,
said
mate, I believe it.
it'll probably go through 3 or 4 countries before it comes to us. Obviously, it leaves its original destination, it's 100%. You know, coming out that jungle. The next
Yeah.
person it goes to, they're chopping 10-15% off that, they're making it bigger.
Yeah,
How many
they're cutting
times
it
does that go on
baby
down the chain?
powder.
And then by the time it gets to fucking Johnny on the streets, he's sniffing 2 paracetamol, an ibuprofen, and some teething powder. You know, he's going to have an
Oh, yeah.
awesome sleep. His headache will be gone for 3 weeks, and his gums will feel lovely.
Yeah, it's a weird one, mate. And like you said, you just take your life in your hands when you're taking like pills and stuff these days. Because I think generally, not like I'm sure there's not everyone's like it, but like generally, people I think are much more selfish in 2019 than they were in 1995.
Oh, 100%, mate. And people don't
Um,
care no more.
yeah, well, thanks, spot on,
Like,
mate.
remember when Leah Betts, that first, like, ecstasy death, the Essex boys, all
Yeah.
that stuff? Look
Mhm.
at the uproar and outrage over that. Someone died off this drug. And it was intense. The whole country knew
Yeah.
about it. There was uproar. As horrible as it is, there's 2-3 people a day in my town ODing and things.
Yeah.
I used
The
to know a
worst.
lad in Ibiza, and he lived with his girlfriend out there. If he wanted to go on a night out with the lads and she was doing his head in, he'd take a load of that GHB, because it'd make you OD and just basically almost like go into a coma for a few hours. And he'd do it on purpose just so she'd get ratty and piss off and he could go out with the boys. People have got no respect for anyone else, and not even themselves.
No. And the thing is, as well, mate, is like, I don't know. I forgot what I was going to say. But going back to DMT is actually natural. Like, it's made naturally, and they call it the spirit molecule. But it's supposed to be very, very intense, you know, and it's supposed to be more sort of visually hallucinogenic than what LSD is. So, like, if you're giving that to like people like they were who who don't know they're having it, you know how many people
That
could
would
have,
send you loopy.
yeah, well, how many people could start hallucinating
Yeah.
and not think that they're having some type of breakdown?
Like you say,
Not many people.
DMT, when you said, you know, it's so much more than LSD. Like, I got a friend who's a proper old school hippie type. And I'll never forget him telling me the story. Magic mushrooms were a trip. LSD was psychedelic. And then when this DMT came out, he said they basically put the two of them together, jacked it up with steroids, and repeated that process about 10 times, and then you got your DMT. He said you can't explain what this stuff is.
So, like, just think about it. Like, if you were just going about your business, whatever your business is, whether you were like, if you were like an addict, or you were in a mental hospital, or you were a CIA worker, analyst, going about your day, and then you started hallucinating and you'd freak out and whatever, like, you're not gonna stop and think, oh, someone must have sparked my drink or my food or whatever, because it would be so intense that your brain wouldn't be able to process that part
Yeah.
of it, because you would just
Especially if
think,
it's, you know, just a member of Joe Public, doesn't do drugs, you know, just a normal general person.
oh yeah,
They never have
you've
done one of
never
these drugs in their
experienced
life.
anything like that.
So that
Yeah.
they don't even know what they're experiencing, and you'd be too scared to ask someone what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
Because you and like how?
It's scary, mate. It's scary that the lack of compassion and empathy that these people had. And I know, like, over the years, they've kind of hidden behind, well, it was my job. This is what that's bullshit, mate.
Yeah,
Because no matter what your job is, it's up to you what you do and how you behave and how you treat people. And if you say, no, that's too much, no, I don't want to do that. And yeah, there might be situations where for some of these people where if they'd said that, they may have been threatened or killed. But
yeah,
like, to me, and maybe it's easy for me to say that I would say, no, I'm not going to hurt innocent people no matter what you do to me. But then maybe that's different if they say, well, that's all right. If you don't do it, we're going to go and kill your children. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
So maybe it isn't quite as simple as just that these people should
But
have just said
it's
no.
more than likely
But
also a case of the agents they used to do this have probably been brainwashed themselves a little bit to go and do it.
yeah, you don't know what they've been through or what they've done or you don't know if they're being threatened. You don't know if they've been coerced themselves. It's it's never ending, mate. The MK Ultra and like the drugging of people. You just don't know how they did it, how many people they did it to, who they did it to. So like the Office of Security in the US, they used LSD in interrogations, and Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the chemist who directed MK Ultra, had sort of other ideas. He thought that if you could use it in covert operations, because its effects were temporary, he believed that you could sort of give it to a high-ranking official, and in this way, it would affect the course of important meetings or speeches. Any like if they're putting some sort of new laws through. He felt that you could use LSD to kind of direct important high-ranking officials to where they want to go, where they want what they want them to say, what they want them to put in place, which would make a lot of sense with the world going the way it's gone. But if found out that they'd all been drugged on LSD, it would explain a lot.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, that's another story. So, and they did loads of shady shit. The experimentation progressed. A point arrived where outsiders were being drugged with no explanation whatsoever. They would like have just giving people surprise acid trips, and it just became something of like an occupational hazard among CIA operatives that they just had to deal with it. Adverse reactions were occurring, such as an operative who received the drug in his morning coffee became psychotic and ran across Washington because he was seeing a monster in every car passing him, thinking that he was being chased. And it's like, they're just doing it because they were doing it. It's not even, I can't even see the benefit of it myself. Like, it just seems like they just wanted to see what would happen. Literally just wanted to, what happens if we give it to this guy? How is
yeah.
he going to
All I
react?
can assume is they were kind of hoping that it just opens up the mind to suggestion. That there's no other plausible
Yeah.
explanation for it.
But like, it seems like they weren't doing it in like a controlled environment a lot of the
Like
time. It
there's
was like
drugs
just
out there that
they,
control aspects of the mind, isn't there?
yeah, of course
And
it is.
not just like not like that. I mean, treating Parkinson's, whatever it might be,
Yeah,
things that are affected by the brain, they can control with medication. There's a truth serum out there. All right, it's not 100% effective, but
yeah.
LSD is
Helps
designed
you on
to
your way, doesn't it?
scramble your brain, and you don't think logical. You don't see what's in front of you. So what? I don't get what they could get from putting LSD into people. Like I
Like, I
say,
can get it.
if it was some controlled drug they knew about, that'll, people keep taking it long enough, they'll be open to suggestion. You can kind of see where they're going with it. But LSD, it just messes your head up. So what good is that?
Yeah, and it's like I could not understand, but like if they were giving it to people in a controlled environment, in like a room, so they could test if they can. I'm sure they did do this to a certain extent, but a lot of the stories which we're going through and stuff now, and we're going to go through, they're like in people in the street, like that marshal in a bar. It's not like in a controlled environment in a
Maybe
laboratory where they can do stuff.
they'd done all the tests in a controlled environment and they didn't get the answers they wanted and thought, screw it, we need to hit this on the field.
It's
Because
strange.
you're not going to get no answers from LSD. No two people are
Yeah,
going to react the same, and no two people are going to see the same thing.
no, and
Even suggestion to people when they're on LSD, they won't see what you're telling them. They'll only see what their brain wants them to see.
yeah, and it's completely dependent on, well, I think all hallucinogens, uh, how your body and your mind reacts to it is completely based on previous, life experience, what's gone on, what's happened to you, what you've been through, what you're going through at the time. If you're really stressed and like depressed and things like that at the time, then there's a good chance you're gonna have kind of a bad experience. If you've been someone who's been like abused and had loads of shit happen to them like that, they're not going to probably have a good experience with it. And especially when they're getting it without knowing. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
just going to
it's
enhance
the getting
every
it
bad
without
thing.
knowing. Like, because you have people who enjoy doing these things.
Yeah, of course,
So
yeah.
to them,
God,
they're going into it happy and positive. So to me, the
yeah.
brain's going to give them happy and positive back.
Yeah,
Like,
because they know what
like I
they
say, when
know
I
what
was
they're doing.
younger, LSD was a big drug of choice. And I seen a lot of people take it for the first time. And there weren't
Yeah,
many people who enjoyed it the first time because they were scared and apprehensive. You don't know what it is. You hear all these cool stories, as they say, from people, but you don't know what it is. And you don't really
yeah, you don't know
believe
what to
you can see
expect.
things until you do it. And then when you see them things, you think, fucking hell, I'm seeing things. And it's scary, it's freaky. The second, third, fourth, fifth time, you're enjoying it more. So you're going into it happy and positive. Do you get me?
Oh yeah, definitely, mate.
And I
It's
think a lot of it is based on that. Like you say, spike, giving it to them, spiking them basically, they're not going to know. Maybe the odd few, when they come up and they go, have I taken LSD today or something? They might
yeah,
click and go, fucking hell, I've been spiked here. But I'm guessing they've tried to choose people who didn't know from all these
yeah.
stories.
Seems like, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So let's move on to some of the people. So the experiments continued, and even so, this Frank Olsen, he was an army chemist. Sorry, I've lost the page there. I have to go down. He was he was one of their own, and like, he ended up dying, and they said he killed himself. And it's like if they, and that's what gets me is like they do it to people who legitimately are like part of their kind of, not that we don't want to say they're part of their gang, but they're on their side.
Yeah.
They're ingrained in the military way of life. They're people who were part of their team, if you like. It's not like they're enemies there who they're torturing or prisoners of war or something like that. Not that that would make it any better, but just in terms of like what they're doing, is there's no rhyme, no reason to it. Like they're doing it to people who, if you asked a lot of those people if they would take part in some experiments to help the security of the United States of America, a lot of them probably would have said yes because they were already part of the CIA or part of the the army or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's there's no rhyme or reason to this whatsoever. It's like we're doing a serial killer one and trying to ration what they're doing.
Yeah, but
It's
it's the U.S. government.
You know, it's like this,
So,
like the drugs they've used and things. There's no explanation or reason why they would use them drugs.
I think now we know that, but maybe at the time they didn't.
Yeah, like you say, because
So
at the time it was all about love and happiness. And when you're
yeah,
like that, you're probably more open to persuasion, or when you're broken and down. So either way, drugs like that haven't got a middle ground. You're either way up or way down.
yeah, right. Frank Olsen. So he worked at a university in West Lafayette in Indiana, and then he served as a captain in the U.S. Army Chemical Corps. And as a civilian, he was recruited to Camp Dietrich and to the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Laboratories. So that's what I mean. He was like, he's in there. He might not have been part of these experiments as such, but he is in those kind of departments. Olsen's duties included experiments with aerosolized, uh, aerosolized anthrax, and there were allegations that the US Army had used biological weapons during the Korean War, which they always denied. 10 years, Olsen was a senior bacteriologist at the program. So he was involved in like experimentation with biological weapons, like top secret kind of programs at the time. He began working as a CIA employee with the CIA technical services staff, which was TSS, which was run by that Sidney Gottlieb, which I mentioned just now.
Yeah.
And a deputy, Robert Lashbrook. So some of the CIA colleagues were involved in the MK Ultra programs, which was previously known as Artichoke, and Project Bluebird, which we discussed on part 1. So the author of a book about Frank Olsen reports that the meeting at which Olsen was dosed with LSD took place in Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. And he says, Deep Creek Lake was 3 hours by car from Camp Dietrich. So on Wednesday morning of November 18th, 1953, about a week before Thanksgiving, a group from the SO division, including the chief of the division and Frank Olsen and several other people, drove out to the retreat. The Dietrich group was met at the lodge by Sidney Gottlieb and his deputy, Robert Lashbrook, and a couple of others from the CIA. On the second day of the retreat, after dinner, Gottlieb spiked a bottle of Cointreau with a small quantity of the substance that he and his TSS colleagues privately referred to as the sarin. The sarin, but which it was in fact a isosurgic acid diethylamide, or LSD. I should have just said LSD there. So they spiked him at this retreat. Olsen then asked to quit the biowarfare program the week after the retreat. Ruitt was surprised to see Olsen at 7:30 in the morning, but asked him in. Olsen told him that he was dissatisfied with his own performance at the retreat and that he was experiencing considerable self-doubt, and that in fact he had decided he would like out of the germ warfare business. He wanted to leave Camp Dietrich and devote his life to something else. So basically, they had a CIA retreat of some sort. And this guy from Sidney Gottlieb and his colleagues from the SO division decided that they would spike the Cointreau with LSD. Afterwards, Frank Olsen started to suffer with, self-doubt. Sounds like in what we would probably describe now as like depression or anxiety and things like that. So that's the story up to there. What do you think about that, mate?
I don't really believe it, to be honest, mate. Let's be fair.
No?
No.
So, well, this is, we'll get onto it now, but years later, it's all been proven true. But so Frank Olsen then subsequently suffered a severe paranoia and nervous breakdown. The CIA sent him to New York to see one of their doctors, who recommended that he be placed into a mental institution for recovery. Who was basically a CIA doctor, was helping with psychotropic research into the effects of the drug. So the doctor they sent him to was also part of the research of the effects of LSD. So the ensuing police report said that on his last night in Manhattan, Olsen purposely threw himself out of the window of his 10th floor hotel room, which he'd been sharing with Lashbrook, which was the deputy to the chief guy, and he died shortly after impact. So, CIA man says he wants out after he's been dosed. Then he kills himself. Okay. So,
do
like
you
up
know what
there,
makes me question this story a lot, though?
well,
A deputy wouldn't be room sharing.
let me just check what he was. Sure, I said deputy, didn't I? Yeah, it was run by Sidney Gottlieb and his deputy. So but they're all in this secret technical services staff group. So I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I can see what you mean.
Right,
That
films are
maybe the
loosely based on the truth. Name me any film where CIA agents share a room unless they're on a mission. They're going to briefings, meetings, anything like that. They don't.
But remember that this is at this point that's the official story that they were sharing a room and that he threw himself out of the 10th floor window. What's happened in the years gone since then is that it's actually been proved that that's not what happened. So rather than, I'm not going to go through, there's a big huge breakdown of what happens each year. I'm going to kind of skip ahead a little bit. Basically his sons,
Screw the foreplay, just do us.
Yeah, right. So in 2013, 2012-13, his sons Eric and Niles Olsen filed a lawsuit in Washington D.C. seeking unspecified damages. Do you know what? I should missed out a bit there. They got paid. The family got paid off in 1975. Should have read that. But so in 1975, Olsen's family and friends told Olsen's family told friends that Olsen had suffered a fatal nervous breakdown, which had resulted in the fall. The family had no knowledge of the specific details surrounding the tragedy until, wait for it now, you're going to love this, the Rockefeller Commission uncovered the CIA MK Ultra activities in 1975. That year, the government admitted that Olsen had been dosed with LSD without his knowledge 9 days before his death. And after the family announced that they planned to sue the agency over his death for wrongful death, the government offered them an out-of-court settlement of $1.25 million, which was later reduced to $750, which they accepted. The family received apologies from President Gerald Ford and the CIA director. Okay. So, the CIA in 1975 admitted that they dosed him, but the story was still that he killed himself. They paid the family off, basically, so they didn't sue the government. Then in 2013, his sons tried to reopen it and seek more damages because they felt there was documents which meant that he hadn't thrown himself out the window. But the judge dismissed the suit. But he said, while the court must limit its analysis to the four corners of the complaint, the skeptical reader may wish to know that the public record supports many of the allegations in the family suit, far-fetched as they may sound. And basically what he's referring to is they got an ME medical examiner to examine, they exhumed the body and they had a look, at the injuries to the body. They found a large hematoma on the left side of his head and large injuries to his chest. And the team of ME doctors and stuff concluded in 1996 that blunt force trauma to the head injury and to the chest had not occurred during the fall, most likely occurred in the room before the fall. They called the evidence rankly, starkly suggestive of homicide, which is when then the family sort of pushed on between 96 and 2013 to try and get their story out there. But there you go, mate. That's the story of Frank Olsen. It is crazy, isn't it? And like that judge said, it's like, it sounds so far-fetched, but it's true. And it's like, Jesus
Especially
Christ.
back then. Like now, it's a lot more believable that people will do these things to other people. But back then, a lot of the world was built on morals and respect. But it just shows how shady the governments have always been.
Yeah, you think of how like 1960s America was portrayed as like being really like mild-mannered and family values and this, that type of stuff. Yeah, 2.4 children and, this sort of like the perfect life type thing. And the thing which gets me about Frank Olsen, apart from the length of time that it's taken his family to, to get to the truth and finally get evidence to support the truth and expose all of it, is that he was one of them. Not just like he was in the CIA as like just some sort of analyst or like in the army as just a soldier somewhere. He was literally part of their like secret programs, their biological weapons, their chemical weapon type things, like all their top secret weaponry. He was a part of that team.
Yeah.
And they just completely discarded him. And, maybe they killed him because after they dosed him, it seems like he had like a bit of a change of heart and didn't want to be involved in that shady shit anymore. And maybe they felt like they couldn't risk someone who's been dosed as well, kind of leaving the program or the team or whatever you want to call it. And because he'd had that kind of change in thought process about wanting to be involved in chemical or germ warfare, maybe they thought he was going to talk. I'm not really. I don't know. This kind of makes sense, doesn't it? That would be the reason why they would kill him. I can't think of another reason why they'd kill him other than that they thought he would perhaps defect and expose like the stuff that they would have done. Right, you good for time and little girl okay and stuff?
Still haven't heard anything yet, mate, so.
Right, okay. So a couple of the other cases I got is so Ken I think it's Casey, I'm not 100% sure how you pronounce it. I think it's Ken Casey. It's the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is obviously a source of inspiration to kind of counterculture movement. Was first exposed to LSD and other psychedelic drugs as part of the MK Ultra project while still a graduate student at Stanford University. He came to be involved in this study by accident as a neighbor who was a psychologist had signed up for the project but had to back out at the last minute. Casey was an outstanding athlete and a straight-laced individual at that point. He had never done any sort of drugs, never even tasted alcohol. At the time of the experiments, Casey was training for the 1960 Olympics, and as he had earned a place on the wrestling team as an alternate. Despite Allen Ginsberg's insistence, Casey did not believe that the project was sponsored by the CIA, and not until decades later did he discover the program's true intent. He said the testing wasn't being done to cure insane people, which is what we thought. It was being done to try and make people insane, to weaken people, and to be able to put them under the control of their interrogators. Of course, the resulting effect of LSD did not weaken Casey, as psychedelics came to be a tool of enlightenment for the author and he turned into a cultural icon. Um, messed up. Casey noted that he suddenly realized there was a lot more to the world than he had previously thought. One of those things that came out of nowhere is that there's room. We don't all have to be the same. We don't all have to be Baptists coast to coast. We can throw in some Buddhists and some Christians and other people who were just before that he had thought was like a strange concept. He had been quite sort of, like I said, straight-laced. So whilst he went on to be relatively successful, and he seems to be implying that the LSD actually helped him with his kind of creativity, if you like, when he went on to write that book, and he went on to be quite successful. The other way to look at it as well is that he was in training for the Olympics. He was already on the wrestling team as an alternate. He was doing, he was never done drugs, never drunk alcohol. Where would he have gone if they hadn't have done those testing?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
But on the flip side there, he probably never wrote that film and would never have been a cult icon.
Yeah, that's very true. It's interesting what he did say, though. He said, we thought that they were being done to cure people who were insane, but they weren't. They were being done to make people insane and to weaken them and put them under control of their interrogators. So it's like another example of them just having no... It's scary, mate, isn't it? That they were so like blasé about what they were doing. So another famous one, or famous name, should I say, who supposedly was involved or affected or experimented on, was Whitey Bulger, infamous gangster who evaded capture for decades before he was finally arrested in 2011. Wow, didn't know that. I knew he'd been arrested like quite late in life. I didn't realize that he'd been arrested that recently. Yeah. Bulger was exposed to LSD testing while in federal prison in Atlanta in exchange for a lighter sentence. For 18 months, Bulger and other inmates were subjected to drug testing, which Bulger described in his notebook as horrible LSD experiences followed by thoughts of suicide and deep depression. He was deeply and negatively affected by the project, and he compared the project to Joseph Mengele's The Nazi Doctor responsible for the horrific human experiments in the war, and he compared it to that. He basically suffered anxiety for the rest of his life. And apparently the gangster was so enraged after learning of the program's true intent and the effects that it had on him that he strongly considered tracking down the doctor, Dr. Carl Pfeiffer, who was the pharmacologist who had oversaw the program, with the goal of killing him. And again, like, they got to him when he was in prison quite early on in life. Wasn't in prison for killing anyone. He was in prison for something relatively light. He got 18 months. What would he, how different would his personality have been if it wasn't for that? Did they make him into the psychopath that he became? Or was he always going to be that?
That's it. That's something you can never, ever know.
I'm sure it didn't help. No, but like, I'm sure it didn't make him like better.
Oh, definitely not. But there's just no answer, is there?
No, there's no way. There's no way to say for definite either way, other than that it goes back to what we were saying about them using people who were in prison, who no one would listen to. No one would, if they had moaned or if they had sort of tried to bring attention to it, no one would have cared because they were just, they're in prison. Doesn't matter. They deserve it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so they just used them like lab rats. So who else have we got? So it's like I haven't heard of some of these other ones, but they were quite interesting. So we finish off with three. So Harold Blower was a professional tennis player who had competed against the likes of Bill Tilden, widely considered one of the greatest tennis players of all time. Following a bout with depression that was at least partially caused by his recent divorce, Blower checked himself into the New York State Psychiatric Institute. Let me tell you that was the worst mistake he ever made. I can tell you that before I've read the rest. He was diagnosed as a pseudo-neurotic schizophrenic. He checked in during December 1952, and he would be dead a month later. Though he was improving and was scheduled for release from the institute, the doctors began treating Blower with a series of injections that turned out to be mescaline and LSD. These injections were administered, though some of the doctors had no idea what they were injecting. Dr. James Cattell later telling investigators, "We didn't know whether it was dog piss or what it was we were giving him." Dr. Cattell was acting on a classified agreement between the Institute and the Army Chemical Corps, which was the same place that what's his face we just talked about was working. Frank Olsen. So the same place.
Surprise.
Whatever. Fancy that. Between the Institute and the Army Chemical Corps, which they used to test various chemicals for potential warfare, and one of the injections given to Blower ultimately killed him. So they were testing potential chemical weapons on people in the hospital.
Yeah.
It's like I'm shocked every time I go through another bit, because you just can't believe the depths that they went to
Chemical warfare on, not just your own people you work with.
Yeah, it's messed up, man. It's like they injected him with all this stuff. He died. They covered it up. Surprise, surprise. And not until 1975 did the government finally admit to Blower's family that it had injected him with the mescaline derivative that had caused his death. In 1987, the family sued the government for its involvement and the subsequent cover-up, and they won $700,000. While Blower was tested as part of the agreement made with the Army Chemical Corps, the principal researcher at New York State Psychiatric Institute was Dr. Paul Hoch, who was a CIA consultant on the MK Ultra project. So yeah, it's all there. It's funny how they're all linked, though, isn't it? Not funny at all, but it's all like the same departments and people, and they're all just like move. It's almost like when you read it back, it's almost like they're moving around the country, just testing their shit out on people who can't defend themselves. And it's either on people who don't know about it, like the work of the agents, the police, whatever, test it on them, or test it on people who no one cares about, test it on people who can't protect themselves. And they're just moving from place to place, just testing new chemicals and new stuff to see what happens.
It's crazy, mate. Like I say, that there's no rhyme or reason to these tests either. It's as if they've just done it for fun. No, we don't really know what this drug does. Let's just pump it into loads of people and see if we can get, a benefit out of it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the last one I want to go through is this US Marshal. The reason I want to go through it is because there's a bit of detail about it, but also because he was not just a deputy US Marshal, but he was also a Marine Corps veteran. His name was Wayne Ritchie, and he claims that he was unknowingly dosed while he was on at a holiday party with other federal officers in 1957 December. In a sworn deposition that he gave as part of the lawsuit, Ira Fieldman, a CIA agent involved in the MK Ultra program, explained the manner in which he observed unknown citizens that he drugged with LSD. He said, "You would just sit back, away from them, let them worry like a nitwit," Richie, he said, and before going on to acknowledge that Richie's dosage was a full head, and that Richie was targeted because he deserved to suffer. The evening he was exposed to LSD, Richie began to act erratically and felt an overwhelming sense of anxiety and worthlessness. After having an argument with his girlfriend, in which she said she wanted to move away from San Francisco, he armed himself with his government-issued revolver and tried to get money for a plane ticket by robbing a bar in Philmont District. During the robbery attempt, someone at the bar knocked Richie out, and by the time he regained consciousness, the police were already there to arrest him. And though he pleaded guilty to armed robbery, Richie was sentenced to 5 years of probation and a fine of $500, and he was forced to resign from the U.S. Marshals. He went on to be a painter and decorator of houses as his primary source of income. More than 40 years after the incident, Richie learned of the CIA's program, and that it had tested LSD and other drugs on unwitting citizens in the San Francisco area. He filed a lawsuit, and while it was dismissed, the court acknowledged that it was quite possible that Richie was drugged by the CIA, but his behavior was more likely some undiagnosed organic condition.
Yeah, sure.
And all I can say is that is fuck off. That really gets me, that does. Because the people who did it have kind of said, yeah, we did it. We did it because we felt like he deserved it. Like he was nothing, so we drugged him and watched what happened. We sat back and watched what happened. And then when he's finally found out 40 years later and thought, no, that wasn't right, I deserve to get some sort of compensation because of my life. I lost my job and I lost my career. The court has said, oh, it might have happened, but could have been just a undiagnosed condition. This,
yeah, sure.
That's like horrific, mate. That is.
That's
like a really sad end to the whole thing. Not that there was ever going to be a happy ending to it, but like, Jesus Christ. There we go. There's a couple of others, but MK Ultra, what a bunch of cunts. That's all I can say.
And it makes you wonder, though, what have they done since?
Yeah,
what's going to be found out? Now? Yes, what's the next big scandal?
Well, mate, I got to be honest. I think what they're doing at the moment is they're pitting the people of the world against each other to see what happens.
Totally divide and conquer.
Because like the leaders and the elite, the Rockefellers of the world, their families, they've got these big mansions with huge underground bunkers. So when everything goes to shit, they'll just go and live in their bunkers till everyone's killed each other and then come back up and
this Amazon rainforest thing, it's a smokescreen for something. Something's going down somewhere.
Well, mate, it's just like they're like everywhere. America, Britain especially, they're pitting everyone against each other. It's only going to go one way. Everything's just going to blow up into like this massive, almost civil war. I can see it coming a mile off. And they're just going to sit back and watch. And I kind of I feel like that's what they're doing. They're like sitting back and watching how people will react. They trace everything on social media. They listen to your calls and your phones and everything else through the Facebook app and your Amazon apps and stuff like that. You know, your Alexas and the Echoes and Google and things like this. So they know, like the NSA, they monitor everything. They know everything that everyone's saying. They know all the different threats that people are making and all this kind of shit. And I do just think that they're just watching and they won't like step in. They'll let everyone kind of clash. And look at America. How many times in the last 12 months have you seen Antifa and some sort of group clashing in the UK. Like if you go on YouTube and type in Antifa, there's like, it's like once or twice a month, loads of videos of like just people fighting in the streets or like clashing or rioting or protesting and turning nasty. And I just think that's what I think they're doing at the moment. Just my view, though.
I think they've been doing it since the
Since the dawn of time. Yeah, definitely, mate. But I do feel like they've upped the ante a bit now with Trump and with Boris. I feel like, obviously, you know, they're the leaders, but they're not the leaders, are they? They're probably going to be the most manipulated leaders ever. Can you imagine, like, the fun, the Rockefellers and the New World Order type people that, you know, they're just telling.
Yeah, they're just puppets.
The Bilderberg group are just telling them exactly what to do, and they want him to rile everyone up. They want Trump to be tweeting, and every time he does a speech, they want everyone to go nuts and hit their social media and hit the streets. They want that.
Yeah.
But there you go. It is what it is, I suppose.
It's crazy how we're going to have like Boris Johnson and Donald Trump pretty much leading us into the next generation, mate.
Leaders of the free world, mate.
Fuck me, I'd rather be on LSD every day.
Yeah.
Something would look rosy.
As they say in 8 Mile, fuck the free world. So, after that jolly, happy podcast ending, tell us what you think about MK Ultra. Tell us what you think about Frank Olsen. Tell us what you think about poor Mr. Ritchie at the end there, who lost his US Marshal job and then got basically told to suck it up and like it. Tell us what you think the CIA and the government are up to these days. What experiments they're doing now. You can tell us in the comments below on YouTube, facebook.com/AceCastNation, Twitter @AceCast_nation. Tell us what you think. Tell us what subject you want us to talk about next. What conspiracy theory. We got new serial killer shows coming up and plenty of shows on everything else coming soon. Drop a like on the video and come say hi. Thanks for joining me, Rhys.
Always a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, plenty of rambles today, plenty of tangents. So good.
Always
a bit of a tangent about psychedelics, but you know, what can you do? See you next time. Have a good time. Have a good day. Laters.
Auf Wiedersehen, Pet.